What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. If you are new around here, my name is Carly. I am a labor and postpartum doula, and I create content all about pregnancy and labor and motherhood and pretty much everything that falls in between. And in today's video, we are going to be talking about something that I love so much, and that is the fertility awareness method and how to naturally chart your cycle, get in tune with your fertile window, and just overall get a better understanding of how you can chart your cycle to either optimize fertility or decrease the chances that you will get pregnant. By the end of this video, you're going to know why I love charting so much and some of the benefits of it, the different phases of your menstrual cycle and the things that you can pay attention to, the basics on what a basal temperature is, your cervical mucus, and the different hormones that your body experiences on a monthly basis, and how to easily and quickly chart your cycle so that you can get a better understanding of your fertility window, your monthly cycle, all the hormones, all the things, just so that you have a better understanding of your personal body. Now, if you're watching this video, you might be somebody who is looking to optimize your fertile window because you are ready to conceive, but this video is equally as helpful for somebody who is doing the opposite and trying to avoid conceiving and just trying to get in tune with your body and understanding your cycle and how to chart and all that kind of stuff. And if you are super interested in learning more about fertility and charting and all the stuff, I have a playlist that I've created about fertility that you can go and check out. I will link it in the corner. And before we jump into it, if you are not yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I would love to have you as a part of this empowering community, and definitely give this video a thumbs up if you are enjoying it so far. It helps me out so much, and it helps other people who are interested in finding this kind of content and my channel be able to find me on the internet. Let's go ahead and jump into it. So for starters, let's talk about the why. Why is it that I love the fertility awareness method and charting your cycle? Growing up, one of the main things, and really the only thing that I was taught and introduced to, was hormonal birth control. And it was something that I didn't have a really great response to. Sometimes hormonal birth control is one of the best things that you can do for your body, but for me, that just wasn't the case. So kind of early on, I had to figure out another method that would be beneficial for me and work for my body. And that was when I started learning about the fertility awareness method. When it comes to fertility and our relationship with our vulva, there are so many different experiences that everybody has. Most of the time when we are taught about how to care for our bodies and our vulvas and our vaginas, it is a very on average type information. So most people have this experience, or you should experience this because you have a vagina. And that's just not the case. There are so many different experiences that you can have, especially when it comes to fertility and trying to conceive. And not everybody is going to have the exact same experience. Not everybody has a partner with a penis that you're going to be able to conceive that way. And not everybody has the same type of hormones flowing through their body or the same relationship with their vulva that somebody else may have. The more you know about your cycle, the more you can provide yourself with adequate self-care. There are so many things that impact our mood and our mental state and our emotions on a monthly basis, and a lot of it stems from the hormones that our body has running through its cycle every single month. And so when we know the why and the how everything happens, we're just we're more able to care for ourselves and kind of protect our energy and our space when we need to. But it's hard to do that when you don't know why something is happening or when it's going to happen or what it looks like. And so this method really lets you get in tune with your body, prevent conception whenever we are not trying to have a baby, and optimize my fertile window when we are trying to conceive. But the number one reason that I absolutely love the fertility awareness method and charting your cycle is so that we as people with vulvas can reclaim our power as the person in charge of our body. Growing up, we are all instilled with the really deep sense of fear. Fear about our bodies, fear about getting pregnant if you ever even have someone look at you the wrong way. Mainstream sources tell us that our vaginas are gross if they're hairy or have odor or scent, or anything coming out of it. And it's all just not true. Our vaginas are truly magical and have so many different things that happen for so many different reasons. And when you get to learn the reasons behind what's happening, it can give you a really deep sense of appreciation and understanding for everything that's happening. And I know for me, as I've grown into like adulthood and gone through puberty afterwards and going into adulthood and now having had one baby and about to have a second baby, for me, every time I go through one of those transitions, the more knowledge I have and the more power I have, the more I'm able to reclaim my ability to take responsibility for my body and really understand that everything that's happening is happening for a reason, and it's not something to fear. It's not something to be afraid of. You are so powerful and intuitive. You can learn so much about your body when you just start to pay attention to a couple of things. So let's talk about the phases of our cycles. There are 4 different phases that our cycle has every single month. So the first one is menstruation. That is the first day of your cycle. When you hear me talking about charting and starting with the first day of your cycle, the first day starts with the first day of your period. If you're looking at the moon equivalent or the seasons equivalent, this would be the moon time is your menstrual cycle, or winter, like your inner winter, is when your menstrual cycle starts. So that lasts anywhere from 1 to 5 days, 1 to 7 days, however long your period is that phase. Once your period stops, the next cycle begins, which is the follicular phase. The follicular phase is the pre-ovulation phase. So this is before your body's about to ovulate, and this is also considered the inner springtime. So during this phase, your estrogen levels are starting to go up and increase. They haven't peaked yet, but they are starting to rise. And we'll talk about why that's important in just a second. The next phase is your ovulation phase, and this is when estrogen will be at its peak, and there will be another hormone that gets intertwined with that called LH, which is the luteinizing hormone. This is when you will ovulate, and it's also considered your inner summer. Then the 4th phase is your luteal phase, or your pre-moon phase, or your inner autumn. This is when estrogen will drop and progesterone will rise. And then depending on what your intentions are for the month, if you are trying to conceive, this is when you will find out if the conception took place, and you would start your cycle over again. If it did not, you would start your cycle again on day 1 in the menstruation phase with the first day of your period, and the cycle will continue on every single month. Now, it's important for me to talk about the hormones that happen during each phase for a couple of different reasons. First and foremost, if you're trying to conceive, knowing which hormones you are paying attention to and which hormones your body needs in order to actually conceive is really important. But if you're somebody who is just trying to get in tune with your cycle, knowing what hormones are flowing through your body can also help you just provide a lot of self-care for the things that you are experiencing on a day-to-day basis during those phases. I'm going to insert one of my favorite charts right here so that you can see the different things that can impact your mood depending on which hormones are high. If you have higher estrogen or higher progesterone, there are just different things that can impact your mood and different ways that you can support your body. You might find during one phase that you're feeling, really outspoken and energetic and like you want to socialize. And then during another phase, you might feel a call to rest and be more inward and have more solitude. And knowing your cycle and understanding how your body typically responds during your phases is really important, because you can then provide more self-care for yourself, advocate for yourself more, protect those energy boundaries when you need to, and when to lean into other things. Now that we have a better understanding of the phases and the hormones that come with each phase, let's get into the nitty-gritty about 3 different ways that you can track your fertility, chart your cycles, and get a better understanding of your fertile window. Because believe it or not, we can get pregnant all of the time, even though I was horrified in my preteen and early teenage years that anytime I would ever have sex that I would get pregnant, and that's just not the case. There is a small window during every single month where you can get pregnant. So let's talk about how you can track it, what it looks like, and different ways you can do that. So first and foremost, let's talk about cervical mucus. This is something that you can start paying attention to right now, today, and it's a really small thing that you can just incorporate into your mindset on a day-to-day basis that will help you get more in tune with your cycle without having to do anything too crazy. So remember I mentioned during the follicular phase that estrogen is starting to increase. Now, when estrogen starts to increase, this is your body's way of starting to do a lot of things. But one of those things is creating more cervical mucus. If you've ever noticed at certain times of the month, you might have more discharge than other times of the month. That is your cervical mucus. And odds are you start to notice more of it right before you're about to ovulate. And there's a really smart reason for this. Cervical mucus is made up of proteins and sugars and electrolytes and a lot of water, but it is a very alkaline substance. Our vaginas and our vulvas are actually quite acidic, and in order to help protect sperm that is traveling to an egg that has recently been released, our bodies naturally produce this cervical mucus that is very alkaline to protect the sperm and also to help the sperm travel up. And our bodies will naturally kind of tell us when we're about to ovulate, because as estrogen is increasing, our cervical mucus will change. By paying attention to your cervical mucus, you can then in turn know when you are least fertile to most fertile. When you are the least fertile, your vulva and your vagina will be more on the dry side. There won't be as much kind of fluid coming out. It's not going to be that your vagina is totally dry. Your vagina may still be moist, but there isn't going to be a ton of cervical fluid exiting your body at that point. And then kind of it can almost think of it as like a meter, right? When you're the least fertile, your vagina will be drier and your vulva will be more dry. And kind of as you get to the point of being most fertile, assuming that you're leading towards ovulation, your cervical mucus will change and kind of increase. So once you've started your ovulation phase, you might notice that your cervical mucus at this point is starting to be almost like crumbly. It's very rubbery and tacky and almost sticky, but if you were to like put it in between your fingers and rub it between your pointer finger and your thumb, you would notice that it would kind of ball up. This is a good indicator that your estrogen levels are starting to rise. And then as it increases even more, you'll notice that your cervical mucus is almost like lotion. It should have kind of that creamy color and almost a creamy consistency too. You would imagine it to be very similar to lotion. So it's not crumbly or like tacky anymore or like rubbery. It's got that creaminess factor, but it's not all the way up to when you're the most fertile, which is how people describe it as being like egg whites, which I know is kind of a bizarre thing to think about. But if you really stop and pay attention to it, you'll notice that your cervical mucus is very slippery and clear. And if you hold it between your fingers, it's very stretchy. And it's hard to get those two kind of differentiated, the one that's more lotiony and creamy and the one that's more egg whitey, which is more sticky. But when it changes from being like milky to being slippery and clear, that is a really, really good indicator that you are about to ovulate. And when your cervical fluids are more like egg whites, that's also a really good indicator that you are about to be or already are the most fertile that you're going to be throughout the entire month. Now, to just completely base whether or not you're going to conceive or not conceive off of your cervical mucus might feel like it's a little too risque. And I totally get that. I also like to pay attention to my cervical mucus, but it's not the only thing that I pay attention to. That's just a really good indicator that, hey, you're getting to that point where you're about to be really fertile. So like start paying attention more. And if you are somebody who is looking to conceive, then this might be the right time to introduce OPKs. Now, OPKs are ovulation predictor kits, and I have one here. They look like this. They come in these little packets and they look very, very similar to a pregnancy test. But the difference between a pregnancy test and an ovulation test, or one of the main differences, is that when you take these tests, there will always be a control line and then there will always be another line to show up. Now, whenever we decided to start trying to conceive, I started keeping track of all of my OPKs in this notebook. If you want to see exactly what I did and how I tracked my fertility to optimize my fertile window, and we got pregnant on the first try. I will link that video above for you if you want to go and look at that. You can see one of the big differences between a pregnancy test and the OPK is that you always get a line, right? You can see over here, this is the control line, and then the line next to it is the indicator of whether or not you are going to ovulate. So what we're looking for here is not the presence or absence of a line. It's a lightness to darkness scale. So you can see amongst all these tests, this one right here is the darkest, and that means that I am about to ovulate. So I really want to touch on that for a second because I know it can be kind of confusing, especially if it's your first time using an OPK. It can be confusing about how the test works specifically. So let's talk about what an OPK is telling you exists. That hormone we talked about, LH, luteinizing hormone, has spiked, and the LH hormone spikes right before you're about to ovulate. So when you're monitoring your ovulation with an OPK, it's not that when the line is the darkest that you are ovulating in that moment. That test is telling you, oh, your LH just spiked, so that means you're going to ovulate within the next, on average, 12 to 48 hours is kind of the window, but generally it's like 36 hours-ish. And I talk about this whenever I go through like how I did everything and how I tracked. That's why a lot of people will track with an OPK in the morning and in the evening so that you can see when that hormone is spiking, because we're not looking to see, oh, it just spiked, I need to, like, I'm ovulating right this second. It means it's spiked, I'm about to ovulate, which means that if you are wanting to conceive, this is your like optimal fertile window to conceive. So depending on whether or not you are conceiving with a partner who has sperm, or if you are conceiving by other means, this is the time of the month when you are going to want to introduce that semen into your vaginal canal so that it can reach the egg. And eggs, once you have ovulated and you have released that eggs are viable for on average about 24 hours. However, if you are somebody who is looking to abstain from conceiving and you're not trying to fertilize an egg, just because your egg is viable for 24 hours does not mean that there is only a 24-hour window that you need to avoid having any kind of sperm near that egg. Although your egg is only viable for 24 hours, semen can live inside of you for up to like 5 days or so. So you want to make sure that there is a 5-day gap between those 24 hours so that if you are trying to avoid conception, that egg does not get fertilized by sperm that has been living there for a few days. Another thing that LH is doing is helping your uterus and your uterine lining to take an egg that has been fertilized. It's going to help to make your uterine lining super thick and squishy so that once you have a fertilized egg, it can implant into your uterus. Then once you've ovulated, you will enter into your luteal phase, which, if you'll remember when I mentioned earlier, is when estrogen begins to decrease and progesterone increases. And progesterone is a really important hormone to pay attention to for a couple of reasons. But first and foremost, if you are trying to optimize your fertile window and conceive, progesterone is something that will help to support and nourish the implantation of the fertilized egg. And this leads me to the third piece of the equation when it comes to the fertility awareness method and tracking and charting your cycle, and that is to track your basal temperature. Now, if you aren't familiar with what your basal temperature is, this is when you take your temperature first thing in the morning when your body is still at rest. And I mean first thing in the morning. It is the very first thing that I do every single day. I keep it next to my bedside table, and you take your temperature. Now, the important thing to note here is that this is not just like your regular thermometer that you use to take your temperature when you aren't feeling well. This is a very specific type of thermometer that shows very, very small increments of degrees, like 1/100th of a degree. Because when your body starts to produce different hormones, your temperature actually changes. For instance, right after you ovulate, your body will start to produce progesterone, and when your body is producing progesterone, your basal temperature will actually increase. This is a really important temperature to make note of and to track whenever you are charting your cycles, because it'll tell you and be an indicator that you have ovulated, which if you're trying to conceive, knowing you ovulated kind of after the fact isn't as helpful in that month. However, if you have been charting your cycle leading up to the time that you do want to conceive, you will know way more about your cycle when you generally ovulate and what it looks like for your specific body. Because even though like the generic average answer for when someone ovulates is the 14th day of your cycle. And if you're using like an app like Clue, for instance. Clue is an app that I used all the time, especially in high school before I started using the basal thermometer to actually chart my cycle. I would use an app like Clue, which is fantastic because it will help you understand your cycle and get more in tune with just like how long it is, how many days your period is, and that kind of stuff. But it is less precise because they're using information and like data that you've previously had in other months to predict future outcomes, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but everything changes month to month depending on our stress and if we're sick or if we've been drinking or if we're traveling, your cycle can change. And so when you're taking your temperature on a daily basis, you can really monitor what your cycle looks like. And depending on if you use a specific type of thermometer, for instance, I use this one. This is the Daisy Fertility Tracker. This thermometer connects to my phone and it connects directly into the app, which then creates a BBT for me, which is a basal body temperature chart, which shows every single day what my temperature looks like and tracks it so that it can show me what my cycles look like, when the different phases start, when I'm ovulating, and when I can expect my most fertile window to be. So when you put all of those pieces of the equation together, you have a really, really fantastic way to naturally understand your cycle, chart everything, and really know when your most fertile window is so that you can either optimize that window and hopefully increase your odds of conception, or if you have the opposite goal and you are looking to avoid conception, then you would know that during your fertile window that you would want to incorporate some sort of contraceptive if your partner does have a penis. But that is going to do it for today's video, you guys. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out with me. I hope you found this video helpful and you learned a couple of things about the fertility awareness method and how to get more in tune with your personal body. If you aren't yet already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I would love to have you as a part of this empowering community, and definitely give this video a big thumbs up if you have enjoyed it. It lets me know that you're enjoying this type of content and it gives me an indicator of what other things that you guys want to see from me. I will see you guys in next week's video. Bye.